Somewhere in France, about 60,000 years ago, a man stopped waking up. He wasn't dead. His chest still rose and fell. His heart still beat. But his eyes wouldn't open, and no matter how hard the people around him shook him, called his name, pressed food to his lips, nothing came back. What do you do with a body that's alive but isn't there anymore? Today, we'd call this a coma. We'd have machines, monitors, a hospital bed, a name for what's happening inside his brain. He'd have almost none of that. Just people, fire, light, and a question nobody in his world had words for yet. Is he coming back, or is he already gone? This is the story of what really happened when the ancient body kept living, but the person disappeared. A coma, medically speaking, is the brain going quiet without going dark. Injury, fever, blood loss, poison, a hard fall. Any of these can push a person into a state where they're breathing on their own but can't respond to anything around them. Sometimes it lasts hours, sometimes days, sometimes it never ends. Now imagine you're a hunter-gatherer 60,000 years ago, and this happens to someone in your group. You have no word for brain. You have no idea that a swelling behind the skull is squeezing the part of a person that makes them. All you know is your brother went to sleep, or he was struck on the head, or the fever came, and now he won't come back. You'd probably do what people have done for the sick and injured for tens of thousands of years. You'd sit with him. You'd try to get water into his mouth. You'd wait. And here's the strange part. We actually have evidence of exactly this kind of waiting. Not from written records, because there weren't any yet. From bones. In 1957, archaeologists digging in Shanidar Cave, in what's now northern Iraq, found the skeleton of a Neanderthal man, archaeologists nicknamed Nandi. He was somewhere around 40 to 50 years old when he died, old for a Neanderthal. But then, they started reading his bones, and the story got strange. His right arm had been amputated, or had withered away, likely decades before his death. One of his legs showed signs of a serious injury that would have made walking painful, maybe impossible for a while. His skull showed a healed wound over one eye, the kind of blow that in many cases causes partial blindness. And his teeth were worn down in a strange, lopsided way, like he'd been using them for tasks his missing arm normally would have done. Here's the part that matters for our story. Some of these injuries wouldn't have just hurt him. They would have knocked him out of the world for a while. A skull fracture like that one, if it happened all at once, could easily have left him unconscious, maybe for hours, maybe for days, while his body tried to decide whether to keep going. And somebody didn't leave him, because a one-armed, partially blind man with a bad leg does not survive alone on a Neanderthal landscape, not for weeks, not for years. Somebody brought him food when he couldn't get his own. Somebody kept him near the fire. Somebody at some point probably sat next to a body that wasn't responding and decided not to walk away. But Shanidar isn't the only place bones tell this story. There's an even stranger one, and it involves ancient humans deliberately cutting into a living person's head. It's called Trepanation, drilling, cutting, or scraping a hole straight through someone's skull, all the way to the brain's protective lining. It sounds like a horror story, but archaeologists have found trepanned skulls from tens of thousands of years, and thousands of them, across Europe, Africa, and the Americas. And here's the detail that changes everything. Many of these skulls show healing around the hole. Smooth, rounded bone growth, which means the person didn't die on the table. They lived, sometimes for years afterward. Think about what that means. Someone in the ancient world looked at another human being. Maybe someone who'd taken a blow to the head and wouldn't wake up properly. Maybe someone having seizures. Maybe someone who seemed possessed or trapped. And their answer was, open the skull. Let whatever's wrong get out. We don't know exactly what they believed was happening inside an unconscious head, but we know they believed something could be done, and astonishingly, sometimes it worked, not because they understood pressure and swelling the way a modern neurosurgeon does, but maybe because relieving pressure on an injured brain can genuinely help even by accident. A person surviving a coma-like state, walking away from a hole drilled in their skull with nothing but stone tools and whatever passed for antiseptic 7,000 years ago. That's not a footnote. That's one of the most extraordinary medical facts we have from the ancient world. So the body could be treated. But what did ancient people think was actually happening to someone in that state? Almost every ancient and indigenous belief system we know of describes something similar. A person is more than their body. There's a spirit, a breath, a soul, something that can leave and, sometimes, come back. Sickness, fainting, deep sleep, unconsciousness. These weren't always seen as purely physical events. Often, they were understood as the spirit wandering somewhere else. Maybe it got lost. Maybe it was called away. Maybe it was fighting something invisible, which means a person in a coma wasn't necessarily seen as broken. They might have been seen as away. This idea shows up in something else the archaeological record gives us, burial practices with built-in waiting periods. At sites like Sunghir in Russia, one of the richest and oldest burial sites we know of, roughly 34,000 years old, the dead weren't just dropped in a hole. Bodies were dressed, adorned with thousands of carefully carved beads, given tools and ornaments, positioned with intention. That kind of ritual takes time. Time to gather materials. Time to prepare. Time, very possibly, to be sure. Because here's the uncomfortable question this all points toward. In a world without a stethoscope, without a mirror to check for breath, without any real way to confirm death, how do you know someone in a deep coma isn't just about to wake up? You wait. You watch the chest. You wait a little longer. And when tens of thousands of years of ritual burial delay start looking less like superstition and more like caution, you start to wonder how many dead ancient people were actually just deeply, dangerously asleep. Now, here's where we have to be honest with you, because not every archaeologist agrees on how much care the Shanidar man actually received. The traditional interpretation, championed by researchers like Ralph Selecki and later Eric Trinkhaus, is that Nandi's survival proves Neanderthals practiced deep, compassionate caregiving, that they nursed injured group members back from the edge, possibly through unconscious or near-unconscious episodes over years. But not everyone buys the full emotional version of that story. Anthropologist Kathy Detweiler has argued that survival alone doesn't prove compassion. It might just prove that even severely disabled people could have contributed enough to be worth keeping around, or that the injuries weren't quite as disabling as they first appeared. In other words, maybe it wasn't tenderness. Maybe it was practicality. Or maybe the wounds have simply been overinterpreted. Nobody's disputing the bones. Everybody's disputing what was in the hearts of the people who kept this man alive. And honestly, we may never know for certain. That gap between what bones can prove and what they can only suggest might be the most human part of this entire story. Here's what we do know. Long before medicine had a word for coma, long before anyone understood the brain, ancient humans were already doing the two things that matter most when someone stops responding. They didn't assume the worst, and they didn't walk away. They drilled into skulls out of desperate hope, not cruelty. They fed people who couldn't feed themselves. They waited by bodies that weren't moving, unsure if the person inside was gone or just far away for a while. Maybe that's the real answer to what happened when an ancient human fell into a coma. Not a diagnosis, not a treatment plan, just the oldest instinct we have, to sit beside someone we're not ready to lose and wait for them to come back. If this kind of story pulls you in, subscribe. We dig up one of these forgotten human moments every week.